My boyfriend's family kept calling me by his ex's name. I thought it was just an awkward mistake until his mother said she was glad we worked things out. That's when I realized he never told them they broke up, and he never told them about me. It started with a slip. His Aunt Carla, floral blouse, coral lipstick, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Emily, it's so good to see you again." I smiled, polite but confused, and said, "Actually, it's..." But she was already hugging me. Tight, familiar, perfumed. Then his cousin Derek greeted me the same way, big grin. "Emily, hey!" He wrapped an arm around me like we had inside jokes, like we had history. I opened my mouth, but he was already pulling Zach aside to ask about work. Okay, I thought, awkward, maybe just a mix-up. Families get names wrong, right? Then his grandmother, Ruth, silver curls and glassy eyes, touched my face gently and said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "You always did." Always, she kissed my cheek, no one corrected her. By the time we sat down for dinner, I'd heard it 4 times, 4 different relatives. Same name, same warm certainty, not Sophie, Emily, and Zach. He smiled through all of it. Not a flicker of correction. Not a pause, not even a glance my way. When his mother, Margaret, regal, sharp, the kind of woman who ran dinner like a press conference, poured me wine and said, "We're just so glad you two worked things out." I froze. She said it softly, kindly, as though I were a returning soldier. Zach just nodded, sipped his wine. And that's when it hit me, not a mistake, a cover-up. He never told them Emily was gone, and he never told them I existed. I stared at my plate, heart pounding beneath my skin. The napkin in my lap felt like it belonged to someone else. And suddenly, I didn't know what I was doing there. I hadn't just been misnamed. I had been erased. Replaced. I looked around that table, the candles, the matching dishes, the careful smiles, and I felt like a placeholder sitting in someone else's seat. Zach turned to me then, still grinning, and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. Because what else do you do when your entire existence has been swept under a rug? By the man who invited you to dinner? I pulled him aside in the hallway. The family was still laughing over dessert, stories about vacations I didn't take, milestones I didn't witness. Stories Emily probably did. Zach followed me out like nothing was wrong, still smiling. Still holding his wine glass like we were stepping out for a breath of air, not to sift through the bones of a lie. I didn't waste time. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't blink, just froze. Then gave me that same smile, smaller now, thinner, like it was being stretched too far across something brittle. I didn't want to complicate things. That's what he said. No apology, no confusion, just that. I didn't want to complicate things. I stared at him. "You brought me here like I was real." His lips parted, a beat then. "You are real, this just isn't the time." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. "Not the time to what?" I asked. "Tell them I exist." He sighed, like I was the problem. Like I'd made a mess by noticing I'd been hidden. "Look," he said, "it's complicated with my family. They loved Emily. It's just easier to let it fade." "But you didn't let it fade," I said. "You're letting me be her." He didn't deny it. Didn't say my name, just looked at me like he wanted me to drop it. So I did, on the outside. I went back to the table. I sat beside his mother, who kept smiling at me like I was a second chance. I answered questions like I belonged in a history that wasn't mine. I laughed on cue. I wore a name that wasn't mine. And Zach, he sat beside me, like I was lucky just to be in the room. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, not exactly. Because I was rewriting. Rewriting myself in his story, trying to find where I fit, trying to figure out if I ever did. I lay awake in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many of those smiles downstairs were meant for someone else. How many conversations I'd stepped into mid-scene, how long I'd been the stand-in. When he finally dozed off, I picked up my phone, opened Instagram, scrolled through his page. Nothing, not one post of us. No couple selfies. No tagged date nights. No blurry photos of brunch or hikes or road trips. But Emily, 2 years of her. Pinned beach photos. Christmas with his family, the family that just poured me wine like I was a recycled memory. Birthday captions like, 2 years and still the person who gets me better than anyone. My home, my calmed. No one gets me like she does. The kind of things you write when you want the world to know who you chose. And suddenly I saw it, all of it, through cold, hard light. I was never the one he showed. I was the one he hid, not because he was private, but because I wasn't her. I didn't confront him again. What was there left to ask? He'd already answered the important part. He just hadn't used words, so I watched. Watched how his mom looked at me like I was a comeback story. Watched how he stiffened every time someone said Emily, even though he never corrected them. Watched how he let me shrink, how he made no room for me to be real because it was more convenient if I wasn't. He kissed me in front of them, held my hand, played the part, but I wasn't playing anymore. I was studying. Cataloging every fake smile, every dodge, every way he had turned me into a shadow of someone I never agreed to impersonate. And somewhere in that silence, I stopped shrinking. The ache cooled, the rage sharpened, and a decision started to grow, not loud, but certain. He thought I was staying quiet because I was still trying, but I wasn't. I was preparing. The next day was his father's birthday. Big dinner, big crowd. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't met yet, all filtering in with bottles of wine and arms full of stories. The backyard was strung with lights. Tables lined up under trees. A homemade banner that read, "Happy 65th, Dad." Zach was glowing like nothing had happened, like the night before had been erased, like I had agreed to be invisible again. He handed me a glass of champagne, brushed his hand down my back, said, "I'm going to do a toast. Wanna stand with me?" I smiled, soft, warm, absolutely. He kissed my cheek, whispered, "That's my girl." And I nodded, because I knew exactly what I was going to do. He thought silence meant forgiveness. He thought not yelling meant I'd moved on. He thought love was something he could rename when it was convenient. But names matter, and I was done living under someone else's. The room went quiet. Well, the backyard, but it felt like a room. Lights dimmed by the dusk. Forks stilled, chairs shifting. Conversations dropped into a hush as Zach clinked his glass. He stood at the head of the table with one hand on my back and the other around his drink. "First," he said, smiling, "I want to thank everyone for coming. My dad," he gestured to the man beside him, grinning in a paper crown, "is the definition of steady, and we're lucky to celebrate him." Laughter, applause. Then Zach turned to me. "And I also want to thank the woman who's made this year the best of my life." His hand pressed into my back. Possessive, heavy, I stepped forward, lifted my glass, took his hand off me, and said loud and clear, "Hi, I'm Sophie Lynn Holloway, not Emily." The crowd froze. I looked around, meeting every stunned face. "We've been dating for 9 months," I said, "and apparently that's not long enough to exist." Someone coughed, someone else dropped a fork. Zach opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there was nothing to say. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was just naming myself in a space where he had erased me. And for the first time all weekend, I felt real, not an accessory. Not a ghost, just me, standing, seen. His mom stood up. Margaret, still composed, still clutching her wine glass like it was part of her, stood slowly, like if she moved gently enough, she could rewind the moment. "There must be a misunderstanding," she said, voice low, smile strained. I looked right at her. "There isn't," I said, "but I understand everything now." The silence cracked, not into noise, into stillness. The kind that hums, where no one knows whose role it is to speak next. Zach didn't move, didn't reach for me, didn't defend me, and that was its own answer. I set my glass down, carefully, like it wasn't mine either. Then I unclasped the bracelet he gave me that morning, thin gold, a single charm meant to be thoughtful. I placed it on the table, right next to the candles. Then I turned, walked past the table, past his family, past their polite, frozen faces. And I didn't look back, because you don't have to run when you're right, you leave, and that says enough. Zach followed me outside. The door hadn't even clicked shut behind me before I heard his footsteps, fast, uneven, frantic in a way that was almost funny after how calm he'd been all weekend. "Sophie." I kept walking. He caught up, grabbed my elbow. I turned just once. "You embarrassed me," he said. His voice was low, like the worst thing I'd done was make it public. Like his humiliation was the headline. I blinked. "You erased me." He opened his mouth, closed it, and I watched it land, really land in his eyes, because this wasn't about a toast. It was about every dinner, every kiss. Every time he let someone call me a name that wasn't mine and said nothing. I stepped back, got in my car. He tried to grab the door, his hand met the metal just as I hit the lock. The click echoed louder than his words. He stood there, mouth open, eyes wide, in his father's driveway, watching his future drive away, and I didn't even blink because I was done being quiet. He texted me 2 days later, not right away, not in that driveway. Because people like Zach need time to rewrite the story in their heads, time to reposition themselves as misunderstood, not manipulative. The message came at 10:41 p.m. I didn't know how to explain you to them. Like I was a puzzle, a problem, a thing that didn't fit on the family shelf where Emily had once lived. As if love needed a preface, as if I was too complicated to name out loud. I stared at the screen, didn't respond, not because I didn't have something to say, but because he didn't deserve to hear it. I left him on read. Then I deleted his number. Let him explain that to himself. Let him sit in the silence he thought I'd never break. Emily messaged me. It came from a private account. No profile picture, no bio. Just the name Emily R. and a subject line that read, "Saw what you did." For a second, I didn't know what to expect, but then I opened it. She said, "I wish I'd done what you did." Said she stayed quiet for 3 years. Said she laughed when she was supposed to. Said she swallowed her own name every time his mother praised her for being obedient, agreeable, small. "He only tells the truth when he runs out of lies," she wrote. And I sat there, staring at that line, because that was it. The entire cycle, wrapped in one sentence. He didn't move on, he recast. Emily said, "You ended it." I said, "That ends with us. No more substitutions. No more shrinking. No more rehearsing love stories written by someone else. We are not his silence. We are each other's proof." I never got an apology, not from him, not from Margaret. Not from anyone who called me Emily with a smile and a memory I didn't belong to. But I got something better. I got to hear my name, Sophie, in my own voice. Clear, steady, unmistakable. In a room full of people who had written me out of a script I never auditioned for. And I didn't just say it, I owned it, every syllable. Every second I stood there, refusing to be grateful for scraps of recognition. That moment, standing up, speaking up, not asking for a seat but taking my place, that was mine, and it rewrote everything. Because I will never again sit next to someone who asks me to disappear. I will never again smile while being erased. I will never again let anyone shrink me just to make their story cleaner. Not ever. People still ask why I left so publicly, why I said my name out loud, why I made it awkward, why I didn't just wait until we got home. I say, because silence was what kept me invisible. So I spoke, and now I'm unforgettable. Not in a petty way, not in a scandalous way. In a way that says, you don't get to write me out and still keep me in your life. You don't get my softness if you won't hold my name. So when they ask why I didn't just keep it private, I raise my glass. To me, to Sophie Lynn Holloway, the woman who doesn't wait for permission to exist. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.